Hello and welcome back to Adulting Anonymous. My name is Kudzai, your host, and I am so glad you could join me. If it's your first time tuning in, shout out to you. If you're a returning listener, shout out to you. Adulting Anonymous is a platform where we have curated adult conversations, and it's basically a community of people that discuss everyday life as an adult. I will be diving further into what we do in Adulting Anonymous in today's episode, so just stay put and keep on listening. So, it is a new year, and this is the first episode, and what better way to start a new year than discussing the vision of this podcast and what we're trying to achieve, and basically just let you in and get your feedback as well as to what you'd expect to hear from the podcast this year. I just first, like one success habit that is prevalent in most successful people is reflection. And I think that's what I'm going to be doing today, reflecting on the podcast, just letting you guys in on basically what's been going on behind the scenes. And we are going to be also talking about your why. And yeah, that's basically what you can expect from this episode. So stay tuned. So to start off with, the vision for this podcast. I think when I started this podcast, I had no idea what I wanted to achieve with it. I also had no idea who would be attracted to the podcast. So I don't want to do anything business related. I don't want to do anything entrepreneurship related, typical the typical concepts of podcasts that are already there. And that's because I didn't want to be confined to one topic, because I just felt like there were so many conversations that we should be having at this time of our lives that we weren't having. So I decided to have a podcast that basically serves as an umbrella to all those conversations. And I remember with my first episode, was it the first one or was it the second one, where I spoke to one of my friends who's in corporate, and people just kind of thought it was going to be a podcast where we rant about corporate being a mess and so on and so forth. And it basically wasn't the idea. And then we had an episode on mental health, and people thought this was a mental health podcast. Yes, it is, but it's not. And yeah, so that's basically what the initial vision for this podcast was. It, however, did change and continues to change. And I don't know who is listening to this right now, but it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to change your path. It's allowed. So yeah, that's basically what I'm going to be updating you guys on. I think I'm still in the stages where I'm trying to find my feet as a podcaster, with regards to what route I want the podcast to change. But I definitely will just continue under the umbrella. So basically, this podcast serves as an umbrella to discuss all the issues that we face in our everyday life. So if it's your mental health, your relationships, your careers, entrepreneurship, we basically talk about that. But then the beauty of it is that I bring a different guest here and there, and we get input from a normal adult. So it's not just my input that you guys will be hearing. Although I want to increase episodes where I'm alone and I'm just speaking, I think we'll also just incorporate that. This year, I want to start each podcast with a quote, and that quote will basically serve as a theme for the episode, just to put some more structure into the episodes and to let you guys know what to expect. So today's quote in this episode is: stop introducing yourself to the next season of your life with a resume of regrets from your past life. Okay, now that's a word I got. I was listening to Elevation Church with Pastor Stephen Furtick, and he said that during the sermon, and it just stuck with me. It just stuck with me, and I wanted to share it. And as we discuss and we go further in this episode, you understand why. So now I want to talk about your why, and I guess the podcast's why. So first of all, before we say what the why is, I think let's start talking about why having a why is important. Why in inverted commas. So your why is a statement of purpose that describes why you do the work you do and why you live the lifestyle you do. It's basically your calling, or some people call it your conviction, a mission statement for some businesses. It is a vision of your life and your work. So basically, from understanding what your why is, your actions and everything you do basically, makes sense just by looking at the time you wake up, the things you choose to say yes to, the things you choose to say no to. It starts making sense because you are guided and led by your why. So that's basically what I want to talk about today. I mean, it's a new year and everyone starts with, set your goals, make sure your goals are smart, make sure the whole acronym. And I just wanted to bring a different perspective to a new year. I love a new year because it's a new season. It's a chance to get things right. It's a chance to cultivate new habits. It's a chance to just install new hope, like invite, positivity. Because I think the thing about seasons is that they're always changing, and with change comes something new. And I don't think there's anything wrong with embracing that. What I do think though is that the typical set your goals without proper follow-up action, or without actually looking at the root cause as to why your goals that you set last year are the same ones that you set this year and you're not achieving them. I think that's where the problem lies. So that's why I say, well, in this episode I'll be reflecting on 2020 from an individual perspective, from a podcast perspective, and basically trying to help you incorporate that in your own reflection to try and see what works and what doesn't. So the reason why I started with the definition of your why is when you set your goals, you're basically setting them from a place of, I want to achieve this because you see yourself in a certain space, or you see yourself in the future as a certain somebody or possessing certain things, and that's your why, right? Now, the thing about goals, 2020 being the year that was, is that you set goals and then you get to the end of 2020 and you haven't achieved some, if not most, or just a few of the goals that you would have set. And I guess the reason in trying to avoid that happening in 2021 is understanding the root cause of you not having achieved it in 2020. And I mean, there could be so many reasons. I mean, we had Corona, we had we had a lot that happened last year, and I won't get into it, but the mere fact that your why is probably not clearly defined, or you forgot it, or something changed in your why could literally be the number one reason why you didn't achieve your goals. Well, for me, it is. So let's say, for example, with this podcast, when you start something new, you're so excited. You have the feeling of starting. I mean, you've just conquered the fear of starting, the whole second guessing, self-doubt stage, and you eventually started, and people are like very supportive towards the beginning. So you've got all that validation that's coming in terms, well, I'm speaking in the context of this podcast. And then you're so motivated to keep creating, to keep having conversations, to keep making time for your why. However, what happens when you're like 3 or 4 episodes in, and all that momentum and all the validation that you had from the initial episode dies down? What happens and what keeps you going? So I found that in as much as last year was a hard year for me, the one thing that kept me going was my why. To remember that I'm trying to build a community of people that discuss things that we deem to be a taboo, or things that we don't really talk about. And even if we do talk about them, we want to bring them out and just let people know that they're not alone. And that kept me going. I mean, I didn't do as much as I would have wanted to, but then just remembering the why. There are times when the validation from certain people in terms of sharing my work or listening to my work was not there, but I still had to continue going on. And it does take a knock on your performance because you're so dependent on these people or the validation in this situation to get you through, as in to motivate you. But then when it doesn't, I need you to understand what your why is. So if you have a goal that you set this year, I need you to attach a why to it. Why are you setting that goal? And why are you saying this is what you want to do? Because it doesn't help to have a goal and not back it up with your why. What's your vision and what's your guiding line, like when all is said and done, when there's no motivation, when there's no one clapping for you, when no one is sharing whatever you're doing, when no one is saying, hey, do this, what is your why? And what's that one thing that's going to remind you to keep going? And that's what I want us to take in with ourselves in 2021. Like, let's set the goals, let them be smart, let them be specific. Yeah. But can you please attach it to a why and keep reminding yourself your why until you achieve this goal? Still reflecting on 2020, I think one of the things that also made me not do as much on my podcast as I would have wanted to do is basically the normal culprit, fear. And I mean, fear is prevalent in every stage of, working towards something. Before you start, when you do start, after, fear is just that enemy of progress that's always like staring at you, looking in the eye on some, you think you can do this. And I guess there's a lot of things to be fearful of. For myself, I think before starting, it was, will anyone, I like saying, before starting, you really are fearful. Is anyone going to listen to what I have to say? Is anyone going to get anything from it? Am I talking to myself, etc., fearful, fear of failing, fear of failing. And I think that's one of the most important things. We are so crippled by the fear of failing that we don't actually get to starting something. We don't actually get to continue something, because we notice the trends of how, let's say, the first few episodes of the podcast go, and then you start get it second guessing yourself, and you doubt yourself, and then you're like, this is not going to get anywhere, I'm probably not going to do well, and then you stop. And that's the role of fear playing and showing up, not disappointing, in breaking my dreams, popping through there. That's the role of fear, I guess, to break you one fearful thought at a time. And I think, in as much as fear is prevalent, I think one thing that has helped me, or one thing that I'm hoping to take within 2021, and I hope you do too, is that you shouldn't be scared of falling. I think the problem with the world is basically that not many people are falling, and not many people are taking shots that we might miss. We only want to take shots when we are certain that something is going to work out. We want to take shots when we know something is definitely going to work out for the best. But what if we took shots despite the uncertainty of success, however you define success in your situation or in your context? What if we do things that could not work out? What if we do things that are not safe? What if we stop being pragmatic? What if we stop asking yourself, can I really do this? I think that's one thing I want to take with me going into the new year. I think, especially last year, I was like, who could possibly listen to me? I mean, I'm not even the best at what I do. I'm just starting this thing. I don't even have a clear vision for what this podcast should do. So why should I be the one people listen to? And I listened to this other podcast, and this black woman said she's basically a founder of a multi-billionaire energy company in the States. And she said, when she realized that there were people that were very illiterate, she made a reference to like one of the presidents in the States who owns an infrastructure company or had infrastructure interests. I'm not going to say who. And she was like, she looked at this president and she said, if this illiterate fool is literally into infrastructure and I'm here knowing all I know, but still second guessing myself, why the hell not? So basically, to drive the point across, to say there are people out there that are less qualified than you, that are probably doing more than you're doing, only because they believe in themselves. And I think that's one thing I'm also taking away with me in the current year, to say I'm going to stop second guessing myself in terms of not just in terms of the podcast, but also in terms of life in general. Like, when I want to do something, the question shouldn't be, am I the best at doing ABC? The question should be, am I the worst? And, knowing what we know about the world is that there's always someone out there who's doing more, even with their with their denseness. No offense. So I think that's something I'm going to take going forward. And I hope you do too, in whatever goal that you would have set, in whatever journey you're partaking in. Just don't be that person that disqualifies yourself because you think you're unqualified. You know what I mean? The other thing that I'm going to reflect on in terms of the prior year is consistency. It's very important to be consistent. And I guess when you understand your why, you plan ahead, you continue doing what you said you would do. Even when the feeling of excitement dies down, you continue doing what you said you would do when you would do it. And I think when you understand your why, you basically are guided by that. So if you know that you want to have a successful podcast, what you're going to do is you're going to record episodes. You're going to put time in setting aside interview time, research time. You're going to be intentional about making sure you have a successful podcast. The thing about being lukewarm is it only gets you the results that are lukewarm. You can't put garbage in and expect something different out. Garbage in, garbage out method is a thing. So consistency, and I think, again, links to your why. And I think I'm very encouraged also to be intentional with everything I do. I want to invest my time in my why. So for this podcast this year, I want us to build a community where we discuss, conversations that really empower us, that leave us feeling, empowered, feeling like we're not alone, and feeling that it's okay to go through the things we go through. However, we need to rise above our circumstances. And those are the type of conversations I want to have on this podcast. And I think it's possible. I think it will be successful. And I think I am going to change the person and all the bad habits, or I'm going to change certain things from last year's approach. Because, like I mentioned in the beginning, if I take myself into this new season, because 2021 is a new season, if I take myself in this new season with my resume from 2020, I'm not going to get anything different out of it. So, like I said, stop introducing yourself into the next season of your life with the resume of regrets from your past life. In this case, my past life is 2020, the context of this podcast, and 2021 is a new dawn. And I just want to bring the best version of myself to this podcast, and I hope whatever goal you've set is also going to receive a new version of you. A new version that is filled with intention, that is filled with determination, and that is filled with a go-getter spirit. And you're not going to give up. One thing I do want to encourage is that whatever you're setting out to do this year, don't be scared to name yourself. Don't be scared to call yourself a writer, a blogger, a singer, or a rapper, an entrepreneur. Don't wait to make your first million to call yourself an entrepreneur, because just by virtue of you starting, you are one. And I think the problem with being scared to name yourself is that you shrink yourself to an extent where your actions start believing that you're not, let's say, an entrepreneur, and then you're self-sabotaging again. So name yourself and choose to show up as the person you name yourself. Anyway, I'm going to stop rambling, but if you've been listening to this and you actually don't know what your why is, and you kind of need help like narrowing it down or just being on the journey of why, I think there's a few questions that you should ask yourself. And like I mentioned in the beginning, that it's okay to change your mind, but your purpose will always be your purpose. I don't think that changes. I think you just discover it the more you seek out to find your purpose and your why, the more you actually find it, the more you're attentive, the more you're self-aware, you actually you equip yourself to identifying your purpose. And I think what's important though is to understand that despite what everyone else is doing around you, and in as much as your external factors and the people you surround yourself with can influence your decision in what you should be doing, it's just important, and this is why I keep stressing, to know your why and be guided by your why. It's okay to know your purpose, but are you being guided by your why? Are you waking up and showing up and living out as a person that knows their why? For example, if you're surrounded by people who are entrepreneurs and that, let's say, went to business school, but you know in your heart of hearts that that's not what you want to do, you start feeling as though you should also be an entrepreneur, that you should be going to business school. However, that's not your why. You know, deep, deep, deep inside, that's not what you want to do, or that's not what you were set out to do on this earth, but you go with it because that's what everyone around you is doing. So it's very important to have a spirit of discernment to basically, stop you, to call you out, or to stop you when you start going to business seminars. Why are you going to business seminars if you don't want to be an entrepreneur? Why are you going to business school if that's not your purpose in life? If you're meant to be a singer, what are you doing going to business? I mean, obviously there's a business aspect, but I'm basically saying, don't find yourselves this year, as you've set your goals, don't find yourself in spaces that don't serve your purpose, because that's only going to deter you, it's going to delay you, and it's going to frustrate you. You're going to get that MBA and you're not going to know what to do with it. You're going to get the business deal and you're not going to be able to fulfill it and show up as your best self, because that is not your purpose. So just a few things. I don't know. I'm also still on a journey, and it's a journey. It's not a destination. You don't wake up one day and you're like, this is my purpose. I mean, some people are blessed to know that. But then even to get to that point is a journey that you need to partake in. And yeah, so just basically, yeah, so these are some of the things that you can do to find out your why, like to find it, because it's there. You just need to soul search and, find it. So the first thing is you can just identify what people come to you for help with, and yeah, and how you can help the people. So basically, in your circles, in your friendships, in your family, there's that one thing that if they want help with ABC, they'll come to you for. And that's probably what your why is, because people wouldn't come to you if they didn't know you could either help them, or if they didn't know you were good at it. You know what I mean? So, are you a person who's a good listener? Do people thank you for, helping them with fuel, etc.? Because that's how you identify your strengths. And 9 out of 10 times, your purpose is linked to your strength. And then one other way you can actually identify your why is if it was announced. Like, I know 2020 was a tough year, and it continues to be a tough year, because it continues to be a tough season rather, because we're still living in a pandemic and people are losing their lives. But if you knew that you only had 1 year to live, what would you spend that year doing? What would you spend your last year on earth doing? And I think that's the urgency we need to live out our purpose in. Because when you live like you still have so much time, and you procrastinate, and you basically put off living in your purpose for a further date, an unscheduled date that has no, you basically delay yourself into living into your purpose, and that frustrates you as well. So just imagine what you'd be doing for a year and start doing more of that. That's probably where your purpose is. Other thing is, if there wasn't any money attached to something, if you weren't scared of what people would say, what would you be doing? That's probably your why. If you remember when you were a child and they asked you, what do you want to be when you grow up? and you said it without hesitation before someone told you you couldn't do something, before the world told you, no, this is not a good enough thing to do, in inverted commas, what would that answer look like? And yeah, that's basically some of the things that you can ask yourself to identify your why. But I think it's important to remember your why. I don't think there's any new goals. I mean, there are new goals that people set, but they are recurring ones. And the reason why they're recurring ones is because people fail in the previous year to get to them. And the reason why people fail to get to those goals in the previous year is because people do not remember their why. So this year, be guided by your why. Be unapologetic about your why. Be selfish with your why and live it out. Live it out boldly and with courage, and just bet on yourself and see where that will take you. So after identifying your why, ask yourself, who am I going to be showing up as in the current year? What am I going to be saying? How am I going to be introducing myself to people when I meet them? And will I be showing up as that person going forward? Thank you for listening. And I'm excited for this new year. I'm excited for the conversations we're going to have. I'm excited for all the new things we're going to introduce to the podcast. And I hope you stay with us. Thank you.